convicted of crimes to their Taliban-controlled homeland. The UN Rights Office warned that surging numbers of Afghans being forced to return to their conflict and crisis-torn country from elsewhere in the region especially, but further afield, was creating a, quote, multi-layered human rights crisis. The UN stressed that sending people, even those convicted of crimes, back to a country where they risk facing serious abuses violates the core international law principle of non-refoulement. Germany, like most countries, stopped deportations to Afghanistan and closed its embassy in Kabul following the Taliban's return to power in 2021. But it resumed expulsions last year when the previous government of Social Democrat Chancellor Olaf Scholz expelled 28 Afghan convicts. The latest deportations come as Afghanistan is already reeling from the returns of more than 1.9 million people since the beginning of the year from Iran and Pakistan. The United Nations said that Iran has deported some 500,000 people in the past month alone. It warned that last week that as many as 3 million could arrive by the end of the year. Let's in fact listen to what the UN Rights Office spokesperson Ravina Shamdasani had to say.
High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk calls for an immediate halt to the forcible return of all Afghan refugees and asylum seekers, particularly those at risk of persecution, arbitrary detention or torture upon their...
We're once again joined by Raymond Vickery to discuss this in further detail. Raymond, does security ever trump the non-refoulement principle in terms of international law here?
Well, it is perfectly apparent that this process of simply returning Afghans to Afghanistan is part of an international problem in terms of how you treat immigrants, particularly those who are fleeing from persecution in their home countries. In the run-up to World War II and during World War II, the Western countries had not an enviable record in terms of asylum seekers, those who were fleeing persecution. And they left many, particularly Jews who were fleeing Europe, to their fates in regard to Nazi Germany. Since then, we have tried to have an element of respect for human rights in immigration policy. But with growing frustration, whether it be in Germany or in the United States or elsewhere, the approach has been to disregard human rights. I don't think anybody is saying that you have to have criminals treated just the same as others, but what is required is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It is a rule of law, a process in which due process is afforded, and there is accommodation for human rights. Do security needs ever trump human rights? Well, unfortunately, sometimes they do, but this is not that kind of a situation. The problem is we have gotten away from human rights as a key component of democracy, as opposed to something which is just a nicety in the fight for peace and security in the world.
Raymond, if any, what role should diplomacy or could diplomacy play in urging the Taliban to guarantee basic rights for those forced back?
And unfortunately, the present regime in Afghanistan is not sensitive at all to human rights. It will require a combination of sticks as well as carrots to try to bring that regime into some semblance of world order and respect for the rule of law. But at this point, to take people and just consign them to a fate which is often involves torture or even death, simply because they are from Afghanistan and may have committed some sort of trespass, is not the right approach. The right approach is one of due process and respect for human rights. At the same time, you bring carrots and sticks to bear upon the Taliban regime. But you know, peace and democracy are not something that occur on a one-shot basis. They must be waged just as you wage war. And unfortunately, we are getting away from that to a one-size-fits-all. In the United States, we're talking about sending Afghans home who have been instrumental in helping the United States and consigning them to a fate which may include torture or even death. And this is not a civilized or a humane way in which for great nations to approach this problem.
Raymond Vickery, pleasure having you on the program as always.